All right, looks like we're live. So I tried this last night, and there were a few things that I kind of messed up. So my audio was coming from my webcam microphone instead of the big microphone you can see right in front of my face here. So while I thought I was muting myself to type away furiously, actually I was just awkwardly, silently slamming away at my keyboard. The last video is probably a little hard to watch and a little long, so I'll try to make it shorter this time and spare you some of the click clacking. But since nobody saw the last video, I guess I'll redo that introduction. So basically today I want to show what my process for taking notes in Rome research looks like, and as the sort of thing that I'm taking notes on, I'll be watching a video that Real Vision put out yesterday, an interview with Mike Green. And so I've already started. I'm not going to delete all this and start over again. But basically, this is my, this is sort of my layout for any video, paper, etc. that I want to take notes on. And I'll show you real quick how I actually set this block up, this metadata block. So I have accidentally delete that. I sure did. That's no fun. Copy block. So actually maybe this is useful. I'm showing you how I create sort of a default metadata thing. So it's pretty straightforward. I just have a couple things that I like to include on every video, book, podcast, etc. that I take notes for. And so if I search that. So block embeds are super handy. If you wanted to include, a live version of the block that you're embedding and sort of be able to edit it in multiple locations, this is handy. What I use it for is basically just to get all of these individual blocks and be able to sort of quickly copy and paste them. There might be a more efficient way of doing this, but basically I'll just do this. And if I were to edit this block, the blue block here, if I go back to the videos page, you can see I've actually filled that in there. So that's not really what I want to do. Anyway. That, and then, I can fill in my tags, etc. I already have some here. So one nice thing about Rome is just the large number of kind of ways that you have to get back to something that you're working on. So, I've got this title, obviously, so I could type in Real Vision, and so the link is right there, so I could just click directly to this page. But if I don't remember exactly what I called it, I could remember Real Vision, and then from there get back videos. Again, I can look at what the most recent tag of the videos page is, get back to it that way. You can't see my sidebar here, but I have videos starred, so I can get to it that way. Probably the easiest way, though, is to start every video that you want to take, or paper, etc., that you want to take notes on. Start the page in your daily notes page. So, example, I create a new video. A block embed thing. Yeah, so now I'm ready to take notes on a new video. So pretty easy to do this sort of in real time while you're watching. Usually while I'm watching a video or listening to a podcast or something, there'll almost always be other podcasts, videos, papers that are mentioned as part of the, whatever I'm watching. And so I can just quickly go in, sort of fill in a quick skeleton of the metadata and so on so that I can find it later. So for example, Mike, pretty early in this interview, mentions the arithmetic of active management, which is Bill Sharp's, I guess, sort of seminal paper about passive investing, indexation, that sort of thing, where he lays out some of the kind of underlying assumptions of passive investing, such as passive investors hold the aggregate positions of the market. The market in aggregate is a zero-sum game, so active participants that do well do so at the expense of other active participants, and you can get the sort of net performance of the entire active universe by following a passive strategy and holding the entire market. Now, anyone who's familiar with Mike knows that this is he disputes some of those assumptions quite heavily. But in any case, I think for the thread that I'm working on to finish kind of the notes about Mike's podcast that he did with Grant Williams and Bill Fleckenstein, to finish that, I do want to actually read this paper so that I'm not just purely parroting what Mike says about it. I was lucky enough to interact with him a little bit on Twitter, and I feel like I need to do some of the work as well and not just sort of summarize his thoughts. So you can see I've sort of filled in. I've just been taking little bits and pieces here and there from the interview that he did, and creating. This is one nice thing. So in So as he's talking, this is what I mentioned earlier. As he's talking, he mentioned this other interview that he did yesterday, and so I can just quickly make that a to-do. That'll show up in my to-dos page of things that I still want to watch, right? So that's pretty handy. Let's see, is there anything else as I'm setting up here? I guess I can go ahead and start taking some notes. So I'm going to mute my microphone. I won't go for too long here, but just to give you a sense of kind of what it looks like as I'm actually taking notes, on a real video. I'll show you, a few minutes of me actually taking. Maybe some interesting stuff will come up along the way about how I take notes in Rome research. So since Mike mentioned a video that I've actually already taken notes on, and he's talking about a section of it that it's a great interview with Numberphile. So if you're familiar with Brady Heron from Hello Internet fame, Numberphile fame, he did an interview with James Simons, who's a legendary hedge fund investor. And I think the salient point that Mike is, in this video I'm watching, the point that he's going to bring up is, let me find where. So I think one of the main takeaways. I mean, it's an interesting interview, and I definitely, if you're interested in this stuff, I encourage you to go watch it. But I think this is kind of the main point that Mike took away from it and has mentioned a few times, where Jim mentions that one of the big things that they have to consider with their algorithm, which for those who don't know about Renaissance, basically they are kind of attempting to do arbitrage, high frequency trading. I, I, I don't know that much about their strategy, but that's at least what my perception of it. And so he's mentioning how they're limited in how much capital they can actually deploy in this strategy because it wouldn't work with infinite amounts of money. So I think their fund is, they have multiple funds, but I think their main one is somewhere around 80 billion, which is huge, but they are sort of constrained in that they couldn't go, it seems, to like the level of a Bridgewater, like double the amount of assets under management and keep deploying it into the strategy that they use. Because when you're trading, this is sort of the key point. When you're trading 200 shares, right, you're not going to move the market very much, right? The order book is such that you can probably find one order and fill that and not move the price at all. But if you're moving 200,000 shares, you're likely to exhaust the front offer, or sorry, the front offer for that stock. And so say there's 100 shares for sale at $200. Well, you try to buy 200,000 and you exhaust that order and the ones behind it and the ones behind it, and before you know it, you've moved the price quite a bit. And so they actively try to account for this phenomenon in their strategy, and they know that it's limited. They know that there's a wall of sort of size at which they can't continue to deploy this strategy, and they have to estimate how much do they think they will move the market by merely getting into the position that they want, right? And is it still worth it, once they've gotten into the position, do they think it's going to move any more than it will already have moved as a result of them merely entering the market? And so that's the kind of thing that Mike points to, where your Vanguards, your BlackRocks, et cetera, like passive index funds that aren't doing anything like this at all, it sort of gives away the game a little bit, right? They're adamant that they do not move the market, but yet for a much, much smaller, in comparison to Vanguard and BlackRock, Renaissance is tiny, right? But, they're actually actively, carefully thinking about this, whereas index funds are just price insensitive, buy if you gave me cash, sell if you wanted it back. That kind of dynamic, I mean, you can have some argument that, yeah, on any given day there's not enough volume, or we trade against ourselves internally so that it doesn't spill into the market. But at the end of the day, it has to affect the market. There's just no way around it. So I'm going to embed that little bit that I took from, so I can shift click here and that'll bring up this page, and scroll through, find the particular bit that I was interested in. Right here, I can copy block ref. I can even actually, what is it? Yeah. So if you hold down Control, click, drag, you can do what I just did with the block copy. And this is different from the block embed. So this actually just links over to this, this other version in this other page. If I wanted to, right, like if I wanted to edit this, I could do a block embed and sort of add my own notes, etc. But that's not really what I'm here. What else did I want to cover? I think this pretty much wraps it up. I think you have some idea of kind of how what my process looks like. You saw me adding video quote here. So whenever I take a direct quote, I always I want to attribute it to the right person. So Mike. And so if I go, if I want to filter this page and find quotes by Mike Green, right? So this is one of the handy things about Rome is, for this page, obviously I haven't taken a lot of notes yet. But if you go look, so here's the page where I took my notes for the podcast that Mike did with Grant Williams and Bill Fleckenstein, and you can see I've got quite a bit more sort of content here, and so I can filter this down. Let's say Federal Reserve, passive investing. So you can sort of drill down to the specific. If I'm interested in treasuries specifically and passive investing, let's say. So I can see the specific bits, and so if I link it, in a significantly indented portion of my notes, it'll include all the bits around it, right? So here I've got a link to U.S. Treasuries and then all the sort of bullet points around it. So this actually relates to something that Mike talked about in like this interview and several other ones. He says, a really good detective holds on to little pieces of information, whether it's in a notebook. Ultimately, I find writing something down and then forgetting where I wrote it tends to be the most effective way of remembering this sort of stuff. Well, I think that's probably true. To some extent, my experience is that, when I actually take pen and paper and write stuff down like this, it does sort of help with retention. But I would actually argue that this approach of taking notes in Rome might potentially be maybe an even better way of sort of preserving all the little interesting tidbits that you find along the way. And Mike's point with this is that you don't want to find one piece of information and then just go try to develop an investing thesis around it, right? You don't just take one interesting data point and then just maniacally focus on that single thing. You want to sort of collect these bits and pieces over time of things to remember for later. So something Mike mentioned in this interview, for example, is the way that 401ks have sort of changed, in 2005, 12, and 2019. Those regulations actually impact the way that, funds are going to start to be deployed. But if you said on the day, I think he's referring to the Secure Act here, if you said like on the day that the Secure Act passes, like how am I going to implement that as a trade? Well, that's unlikely to work, right? In fact, when I first found Mike, I found his discussions of required minimum distributions extremely interesting, right? And so, for those that don't know, this idea is at a certain age, you're supposed to sell a portion of your 401k, because they are retirement vehicles. They're not perpetual trusts or anything. And so you're supposed to sell a portion every year, at least some percentage of your portfolio to draw down your investments. And so I didn't know about that. Mike mentioned it early on in his kind of Real Vision interviews and so on. And so, I thought, great, this is great. I know something that most people don't know. I'm going to go buy puts basically. And as you could probably guess, this was 2017 or 18. That didn't really work out that well for me. Right. So trying to translate every insight, every new idea, every constraint or regulation or anything like that, trying to immediately, squeeze some value out of it isn't really going to be that useful to you. But if you collect those things over time, right, and you keep them in the back of your mind or in your Rome research notebook or whatever, then when they're relevant, you can pull them, back to the light, right? So if there were some changes here that are going to affect, the way that people, sell 401k assets or invest in new 401k assets, et cetera, maybe there's a date associated with that. And so that's actually something that you could, Rome actually makes that pretty nice. So if I say, what's today? So if I say August 2nd, so I'm obviously, there's nothing here yet. Yeah. Maybe if I passed it illustrative. So I can point here, and then when I actually go to that page, right, I can see that I linked to it. So I can't show you what the future will be, but if I included a tag to a future date, it would show up in my daily notes for that day. So it's a way to, if there's some date on which required minimum distributions go up or something like that, you could leave that as a kind of note for yourself for later. But yeah, I think that's probably enough for now. So if anyone has questions, thoughts, enjoyed this, you didn't enjoy this, wish I showed something else, didn't understand something I did, like feel free to reach out on Twitter or leave a comment on the video, and I'll try to get back to you. So thanks, and have a great day, folks.